Jacob Miller had always been a man of few words and great wealth. At 50, he owned one of the largest fortunes in the country, amassed through shrewd real estate investments and a network of successful businesses. Yet, despite his vast riches and influence, Jacob was profoundly lonely. He lived in a sprawling, isolated mansion, guarded by security but devoid of friends or family. Over the years, he had grown wary of people, friends who were only interested in his wealth, and relationships that were tainted by greed and superficiality. So he retreated into solitude. His days were consumed by business, but at night, the silence of his mansion echoed with the emptiness of his life. Everything began to change on an ordinary day. Jacob had been feeling drained for weeks, attributing it to stress, but when the symptoms, persistent fatigue, weight loss, dizziness, intensified, he decided to visit a doctor. He never imagined this appointment would alter the course of his life. Sitting in the sterile examination room, Jacob barely registered the charts and test results the doctor showed him. His mind was focused on the words that struck him like a bolt of lightning. "Jacob, you're very ill. The disease is serious and progressive. The time you have left is uncertain." For a man who had always prided himself on his control over every aspect of his life, these words left him feeling powerless. He looked at the doctor with the same cold detachment he used when making business deals, but inside, the weight of the reality hit him hard. He had always believed that time was his to control. But now he was confronted with the bitter truth. That night, Jacob sat in his luxurious office, contemplating his life. The fortune he had worked so hard to build now seemed like a hollow prize. With no heirs and no family to pass it on to, the idea of leaving it to a foundation or a distant relative who barely knew him didn't appeal. He wanted to leave his wealth to someone who would truly value it, someone who had struggled not to live in luxury, but to survive life's harsh realities. As he pondered, his thoughts returned to a woman he had seen at the local cafe. Emily Johnson, a woman of modest appearance, overweight and struggling, yet always smiling. Despite her hardships, she radiated a positivity that intrigued him. Jacob watched as she interacted with others, always kind, always dignified, even though she faced judgment and prejudice at every turn. It was clear that life had not been easy for her, but her resilience left a deep impression on him. Emily faced the kinds of challenges Jacob had never experienced, yet she remained strong, working hard and supporting herself with quiet dignity. While the wealthy people around him lived in a bubble of privilege, Emily seemed to face the real battles of life, never complaining. In that moment, Jacob knew what he had to do. He didn't want his fortune wasted on someone who didn't appreciate it. He wanted to give it to someone who deserved it, someone he truly admired. That person, he realized, was Emily. But how could he approach her without seeming strange or self-serving? Jacob decided that simply bequeathing his fortune to her wasn't enough. He wanted to understand her life, offer her an opportunity that would change everything for her, and show her that his intentions weren't born out of charity, but respect. He admired her strength, and that admiration led him to make a bold and unexpected decision. With a renewed sense of purpose, Jacob decided that the next day he would approach her. His time was running out, but before he left this world, he wanted to do something that would give his life the meaning it had always lacked. The next morning, when Jacob entered the cafe, his eyes instinctively searched for Emily. There she was, as always, serving at the counter. But today, Jacob wasn't just a silent observer. He needed to talk to her. His heart raced, a feeling he hadn't experienced in a long time. He walked up to the counter, and when Emily saw him, the usual professional smile she wore remained, but there was now a quiet curiosity in her eyes. Jacob had never exchanged more than a few polite words with her, but today was going to be different. "Can I help you with something, Mr. Miller?" Emily asked, her voice polite but surprised. He was there much earlier than usual and alone, without the newspaper he typically brought with him. "Actually, yes. Would you mind joining me at a table when you have a moment?" Jacob said, trying to keep his voice steady, though the urgency was clear. Emily hesitated for a brief moment. It wasn't every day that a customer, especially someone like Jacob Miller, asked her to sit down with him. She knew he was a well-known businessman, always impeccably dressed and serious, but why did he want to talk to her? "Sure, Mr. Miller. I'll just finish up here and I'll be right with you." As Emily finished serving the last customers, Jacob sat at a table in the corner, watching the cafe with hidden impatience. He knew what he was about to do was unconventional, but time was running out. His health was deteriorating rapidly, and he needed to act while he still could. A few minutes later, Emily approached the table. She looked a little nervous, unsure of what to expect. "So, how can I help you, Mr. Miller?" she asked, sitting down across from him, cautious but curious. Jacob looked at her, took a deep breath, and began. "Emily, I know this might sound strange, but there's something I need to tell you. I've been watching you for some time, and before that sounds alarming, let me explain." He tried to offer a smile, but he knew that what he was about to say would change everything. Emily raised an eyebrow, surprised, but remained composed. "Watching me? What do you mean?" Jacob sat up straighter, his hands trembling slightly. "I admire your strength, Emily. I see how you face life's challenges, the prejudice, the financial struggles, and yet you maintain your dignity and kindness. It's rare, especially in the world I've lived in for so long. And that's why I wanted to talk to you today." Emily blinked, slightly uncomfortable, unsure of what to say. No one had ever spoken to her like that before. I don't know what to say," she stammered. "No one really notices those things." "I notice," Jacob said quickly. "And that's why I'm here, Emily. The truth is, I'm gravely ill. I don't have much time left." He paused, letting the weight of his words settle between them. Emily froze, shocked. This wasn't what she expected to hear. I'm so sorry, Mr. Miller. That's terrible," she whispered. "But why are you telling me this?" Jacob knew this was the turning point. He looked at her, trying to convey the sincerity of what he was about to say. "I don't have any heirs, Emily. No one to share what I've built. I've decided that I don't want to leave my fortune in the hands of people who don't deserve it. I want to leave it to someone who truly understands what it means to struggle through life and still stand tall. And Emily, I want that person to be you." Emily blinked, stunned. This didn't make sense. Why would he want to leave everything to her? "I'm sorry, Mr. Miller, but I don't understand," she said, her voice shaky. "Why me? There are so many people who could." Jacob gently interrupted her. "Because you're different, Emily. You don't give up. I've watched you. I've seen how you face life head-on, without complaining, without letting others' judgments get to you. You're the person I know would do something meaningful with what I leave behind." Emily shook her head, struggling to process everything. "But this is crazy. I'm not anyone important. I just do what I have to in order to survive. I'm not like you. I'm not a millionaire. I wouldn't know how to handle something like this." Jacob's smile was soft, his voice gentle. "That's exactly why I chose you, Emily. You understand the value of things, and that's what truly matters." Emily remained silent, the weight of his words pressing down on her like a storm. Could this really be happening? How could such an offer come out of nowhere, and why her? But one thing was certain, Jacob Miller wasn't joking. Her life was about to change in a way she never could have imagined. Jacob slowly stood, feeling the fatigue in his body, but oddly relieved to have said what needed to be said. "You don't have to decide right now. Just think it over. I'll be here waiting for your answer." Emily watched him leave the cafe, still in shock, not sure how to respond. What had he just proposed? This couldn't be real, could it? She knew she needed time to process everything, but one thing was undeniable: nothing would ever be the same. Jacob stepped out of the cafe, feeling a strange sense of relief, even though his mind was full of uncertainty. As he walked through the busy streets of the city, he reflected on how the conversation had gone. The fear of sounding ridiculous or too charitable still lingered, but something inside him reassured him he had made the right choice. He had finally taken the first step toward doing something meaningful before time ran out. Back at his mansion, the familiar loneliness closed in on him. But this time, it didn't feel quite the same. His mind was occupied, thinking about Emily, wondering what she was processing. He knew her decision wouldn't be easy. She was probably confused, and who wouldn't be? The proposal he had made was as bold as it was unusual. Even Jacob, who was no stranger to risky choices, knew he had put everything on the line by making such an unexpected request. In the following days, Jacob kept his distance from the cafe. He thought it best to give Emily some space, time to think. But he couldn't stop wondering how she was feeling. He knew she was strong, but even the strongest people needed time to adjust to big changes. Emily, on the other hand, couldn't shake the conversation from her mind. Jacob's proposal had turned her world upside down, not just because of the fortune he offered, a fortune she had never even dreamed of, but because of how he saw her. To be seen, truly seen, by someone like Jacob was something she had never experienced before. He didn't just notice her physical appearance or her financial situation, he recognized her strength, her struggles, and that touched her in a way no one else had. But with that recognition came fear. What if it was just another trap? Life had already dealt her so many hard blows. The idea of trusting someone again only to be hurt or disappointed made her hesitate. Emily knew she needed to talk to someone about it, but who? She had few friends, and her mother, who was now gravely ill, was the only person she truly confided in. That night, after her shift at the cafe, Emily went to visit her mother in the hospital. Her mother's debilitating illness was a constant reminder of their financial struggles. The mounting medical bills were suffocating, and Emily fought every month to pay them, sacrificing her own comfort and well-being in the process. As she sat by her mother's bedside, gazing at her weary face, the weight of the world seemed to settle even heavier on her shoulders. Emily found herself lost in thought, reflecting on the incredible offer Jacob had made when her mother's weak voice pulled her back to reality. "Emily dear, you're so quiet today. What's going on?" Emily hesitated, unsure whether to burden her mother with her turmoil. But at the same time, she felt the need to share what had happened. "Mom, something strange happened this week. A man, he made me an offer I never imagined. He said he's seriously ill and wants to leave his entire fortune to me." Her mother stared at her in disbelief, her eyes wide with shock. "What? What do you mean, dear? Who is this man?" Taking a deep breath, Emily explained everything, how Jacob Miller, the millionaire she served at the cafe, had approached her with this unexpected proposal. After she finished, her mother sat in stunned silence, trying to process the unbelievable story. He wants to leave everything to you?" Her mother's voice was full of disbelief. That's unbelievable. "Emily, have you thought about what this could mean for your life? For our life?" Emily nodded slowly, the weight of it all sinking in. "Yes, Mom. It could solve so many of our problems. I could pay off all your medical bills. I could finally breathe. But what if it's not real? What if I accept and then find out it was just another disappointment?" Her mother squeezed her hand tightly, her gaze unwavering. "Emily, you've always been a strong woman. If this man is sincere, maybe this is your chance to finally have the life you deserve. You fought so hard. Maybe it's time to accept help when it's offered. But remember, the decision is yours. Only you can know what's best for you." Those words echoed in Emily's mind long after the conversation ended. She knew her mother was right. Her life had been a constant struggle, and maybe it was time to let someone else offer a hand. But the fear still lingered, twisting in her gut. In the days that followed, Emily couldn't stop thinking about Jacob's offer. She wondered why he had chosen her. Out of all the people he could have picked, why her? The thought of being worthy of something so grand was terrifying, but it also stirred something deep inside her, hope. Later that week, Emily made up her mind. She couldn't ignore what was happening. She had to face Jacob, learn more, and see if this offer could be the chance she had been waiting for, a chance to change not just her life, but her mother's life too. That weekend, she returned to the cafe where she had first met Jacob. Her heart raced as she waited for him, her mind a whirlwind of conflicting emotions. When Jacob walked in, she stood and went straight to him. "Jacob, we need to talk," Emily said, her voice steady but firm. Jacob, both surprised and relieved, nodded. "Of course, Emily. Let's sit down." Once seated, Emily began, her voice a mixture of uncertainty and resolve. "I've thought a lot about what you said, and I still can't believe that someone like you would choose me for something like this. But I need to understand. Why me? Why not leave your money to a charity or someone closer to you?" Jacob looked at her, his eyes filled with sincerity, and his answer caught her off guard. "Because I see something in you that I've never seen in anyone else. You're strong, Emily. You fight every day, and yet you don't let it break you. I have no family, no heirs, and I don't want my fortune to go to someone who doesn't understand what it means to face real challenges. I know it may sound strange, but you've given me a reason to believe that my life and my money can have a real purpose. That's why I chose you." Jacob's words hit Emily like a tidal wave, leaving her breathless. She didn't know whether to cry or thank him. What she did know was that Jacob was being completely sincere, and for the first time in what felt like forever, she felt truly seen, not for what she lacked or for her circumstances, but for who she was. A resilient woman who had fought for everything she had. The days that followed were a blur. Jacob's proposal lingered in her thoughts, and the idea that her life could change so drastically both frightened and fascinated her. Every step she took at work felt heavier. Each glance from the cafe's customers reminded her of the millionaire who had so unexpectedly offered her a new reality. But Emily knew one thing for certain: she couldn't let herself be turned into something she wasn't. On the afternoon, she finally decided to meet Jacob and give him her answer. She felt the weight of the decision on her shoulders. This wasn't just about accepting financial help, it was about who she would become. The temptation of the offer was undeniable, but she had to decide if it was truly right for her. Emily knew she had to remain resolute. Jacob was already waiting for her at the cafe. He appeared composed, but his eyes betrayed his anxiety. He was eager to hear her response. As she approached him, his faint smile vanished, replaced by a focused expression. He understood that her answer could change everything. Emily sat down across from him, locking eyes. The usual formalities between them were gone. This conversation was different. It was time to speak honestly. Jacob broke the silence first. "I imagine you've given this a lot of thought," he said, his voice lower and more cautious than usual. "Yes," Emily replied, her tone firm. "And that's exactly why I'm here. I won't deny it, the proposal you made could change my life. But I want to make it clear that if I accept, it will be on my terms." Jacob raised an eyebrow but remained silent. He watched her intently, trying to gauge her meaning. "I've spent my entire life fighting for what's mine, Jacob," Emily continued. "Accepting help has never been easy for me. And now, after everything, accepting something like this would mean losing the one thing I still have, my freedom. If I become part of this, I need to know that I'll still be the person I am." Jacob listened carefully, nodding slightly as she spoke. He had anticipated that Emily wouldn't simply accept the offer without setting conditions. He had always admired her strength and principles. Those were the qualities that had drawn him to her in the first place. He didn't see her as someone desperate for charity, and it was important to him that she understood that. "I understand," Jacob said, his voice calm. "I want you to know that what I'm proposing isn't about changing who you are. If change comes, it will be because you choose it, not because I impose it. I'm not offering you a life of luxury for luxury's sake. I'm offering you the opportunity to live freed from the struggles that have held you down for so long." Emily looked at him, trying to decipher his words. There was sincerity in his tone, but her fear still lingered. Accepting his offer would mean stepping into a life that was so unfamiliar to her, and the thought of losing everything she knew terrified her. "You can't expect me to just accept your offer without question yet, Jacob," she said, her voice steady. "I'm not the kind of person who changes their life for money. If I accept, it will be on the condition that I keep my independence, continue my work, and maintain my dignity. I'm not a charity case." Jacob leaned in slightly, his expression unwavering. "Emily, I never meant to turn you into something you're not. I chose you because I admire how you face life's challenges. What I'm offering is a chance for you to break free from those challenges, not to reshape you, but to give you the chance to remain who you are, with more opportunities at your disposal." Emily absorbed his words carefully. Finally, she understood. Jacob wasn't trying to place her in a position of dependence or inferiority. Rather, he was offering her a partnership, an opportunity for both of them to find something that had been missing in their lives. She knew that the financial support would solve many of her problems, but more than that, she felt this offer could allow her to grow without compromising her identity. "If that's the case," Emily said after a pause, her voice soft but resolute, "then I accept. But I want you to understand that, even with this new reality, I will continue to be the woman I am, and I will keep working, because that's who I am." Jacob's smile deepened, this time more confident, more assured. "That's exactly what I expect from you, Emily." Emily felt a wave of relief mixed with excitement. She knew the road ahead wouldn't be easy, But for the first time in a long time, she saw the possibility of a future that was different, one filled with new opportunities. Despite the lingering fear in her heart, she knew she had made the right choice. Jacob extended his hand, and she shook it, sealing the agreement that would change their lives forever. Emily and Jacob's wedding came in a way few would have imagined, simple, without opulence, without guests, and without the usual expectations. Surrounded by the usual grandeur of major events, their ceremony stood in stark contrast, an incredibly simple affair, with no public records and no extravagant celebrations. Only 3 people knew of the moment: Emily, Jacob, and her mother. Privacy was paramount, and Jacob wanted the commitment to be between them, not dictated by the expectations of the world. That morning, the garden of Jacob's mansion was quietly prepared. The sky was clear, and a gentle breeze stirred the leaves of the trees, as if nature itself was offering its silent blessing to the couple. Emily wore a modest white dress, devoid of any embellishments, and her hair flowed loosely in the wind. Her heart raced. She had never imagined her life taking such a turn, let alone marrying under such extraordinary circumstances. Jacob, on the other hand, stood beside a small table in the center of the garden. His health was visibly fragile, but there was an unexpected vitality in his eyes. Something about that day gave him strength, and Emily could sense that the commitment they were about to make went far deeper than just words and rings. As she walked toward him, a flood of emotions washed over her: gratitude, respect, love. Everything seemed to unfold naturally, free from the formalities that often accompany large events. There was no audience, no external pressures. It was just Jacob, her, and her mother, watching with pride and quiet emotion. The justice of the peace, there to officiate the union, began the ceremony with a few simple words. He knew there was no need for elaborate speeches. Jacob, always direct, had requested a brief ceremony without long promises or fanfare. For him, the essence of the commitment was what mattered most. Emily, Jacob began, his voice steady despite his frail appearance. Today, I'm not just offering you marriage. I'm offering you the last part of myself, something I've never given to anyone else. I know my health is fading, but with the time I have left, I want to share it with you, not out of obligation, but by choice. You've shown me something I've never found in my life: sincerity. That's why today, I commit to living by your side, honoring your strength and your courage. Jacob's words struck Emily deeply. She felt a tear well up in her eyes, but she held it together. She knew he was speaking the truth, and it offered her a kind of comfort she had never known. When it was her turn to speak, Emily took a steadying breath and looked directly into Jacob's eyes. Jacob, from the start, you gave me something few people truly understand: respect. Not for what you have, but for who you are. Today, I'm not accepting this union just as a formality. I'm accepting it because, by your side, I've found a place where I can be myself without fear of judgment. And for that, I commit to being by your side, for however much time we have together. After Emily finished speaking, the justice of the peace concluded the ceremony with a simple gesture. Jacob and Emily exchanged rings, simple bands, sealing their commitment in the quiet, intimate setting that would forever mark the beginning of their shared journey. But for them, it meant far more than just a symbol of union. When the justice declared them husband and wife, there was no applause, no loud celebrations, only the soft whisper of the wind and the quiet, meaningful glances exchanged between them. Jacob, smiling for the first time in a long while, took Emily's hand and gently pulled her closer. Now we're officially partners, he whispered, as they walked away from the table and made their way toward the house. Emily's mother, watching from a distance, couldn't hold back her tears. She knew this was the best thing for her daughter, and she understood that Emily had found someone who truly respected her and would do everything to ensure her well-being. The days following the wedding were filled with adjustments. The life they had chosen to share was just beginning, but both were aware that the challenges ahead would not be easy. Jacob, conscious of his increasingly frail health, made sure Emily had full control over her new life. He respected her decision to continue working at the cafe and never pressured her to change. However, there were things beyond their control: the stares and rumors that started circulating after the wedding. Although they had kept the event a secret, Jacob's closeness to Emily didn't go unnoticed by the regulars at the cafe. She married him, didn't she? It's obvious, some murmured. Who would have guessed? A cafe worker now married to a millionaire. What did she see in him? Or maybe it's the other way around, others whispered, their words dripping with malice. Emily heard the comments, but she tried to stay calm. Despite having braced herself for the criticism, the sting of those harsh words still cut deep. She knew that her marriage to Jacob would never be easily understood by many, but she stood firm, resolute in her decision. One afternoon, after a particularly rough day at the cafe, Emily arrived at Jacob's mansion, exhausted both physically and emotionally. Jacob, sitting in his office chair, immediately noticed the tension on her face as she walked in. Without a word, he reached out his hand, inviting her to sit beside him. "Rough day?" he asked softly, already knowing the answer. Emily nodded, taking the cup of tea he had prepared for her. "People are talking a lot," she said. "They look at me differently, as if everything I've done was just for your money." Jacob sighed, his expression softening. "I'm sorry, Emily. I knew this would happen, but that doesn't make their words any less hurtful. I know those people don't matter, but sometimes it feels like everything I've worked for, everything I've built for myself, is being dismissed because of what they think." Emily's voice grew heavy with frustration. "I know, but it still stings." Jacob took her hand in his voice firm now. "You know that's not true. I know who you are, and the people who matter know it too. The rest, it's just noise. Don't let it make you doubt who you are or what we're building together." His words brought her some relief. Emily knew that their path together would be full of challenges, but she was ready to face them. In that moment, she realized that despite all the difficulties, she had found something rare. Partnership built on respect, trust, and truth. For Emily, the marriage was about much more than her union with Jacob. It became a daily battle against the judgments and prejudices that only seemed to grow stronger since the whispers began. The gossip didn't stop. Each day, a new rumor would spread. The comments seemed to grow more cruel and relentless, as if people believed they had a right to judge every aspect of her life. Emily, who had always stood tall in the face of adversity, now felt the weight of the world pressing down on her with each step she took. She can't be doing this for love. Who marries a man so much older and sick? Emily overheard one customer whisper to another while she served coffee. On another day, a former regular, who used to greet her with a smile, made a sarcastic remark as he paid his bill. "So now you're the millionaire's wife, huh? Must be living the high life." Those seemingly trivial words began to gnaw at Emily, affecting her more deeply than she was willing to admit. She knew, logically, that other people's opinions didn't matter, but it was impossible to ignore the judgmental stares that followed her wherever she went. The cafe, once a place of comfort and familiarity, now felt like a suffocating cage. Jacob, too, began to notice the emotional toll it was taking on Emily. Despite her best efforts to hide it, he could see the strain in her eyes. Already grappling with his own health struggles, Jacob felt powerless to shield her from the harshness of the outside world. His support for her was unwavering, but he knew there were battles Emily would have to fight on her own. One evening, after returning from a grueling day at work, Emily collapsed into a chair in the living room, utterly drained. The weight of the accusations and invasive questions felt unbearable. The silence between them was both a comfort and a burden, unspoken words hanging heavy in the air. Jacob knew it was time to address the tension that had been building for days. "Emily, you know you can talk to me, right?" Jacob's voice was soft but full of concern. Emily let out a long sigh, staring at the floor for a moment before finally lifting her eyes to meet his. "I know, Jacob, it's just, everything feels different now. People look at me in ways I never imagined. And the worst part is, I'm starting to doubt myself. What if, in some way, they're right?" Jacob's expression hardened with conviction. He leaned forward, his gaze never leaving hers. "They're not right, Emily. Not even close. You made this decision for your own reasons, and no one else has the right to question it. Those people, they don't know you. They only see what they want to see." "But it's hard," she admitted, her voice trembling. "I didn't care about other people's opinions before, but now it feels like I'm carrying the weight of everyone's judgment on my shoulders." Jacob took her hands in his, squeezing them gently but firmly. His voice was filled with sincerity. "You're stronger than that, Emily, and what we're building together is real. Don't let that noise make you doubt who you are or what we're doing. I see your struggle, and I admire you for it." Though Jacob's words offered some comfort, Emily couldn't shake the deeper unease gnawing at her. It wasn't just the harsh words of others, it was the self-doubt she was beginning to feel. She had known marrying Jacob would bring challenges, but she hadn't expected it to make her question her own identity. Later that night, while Jacob rested, Emily walked alone through the garden of their mansion, hoping the cool night air would offer some reprieve. The sky above was a blanket of stars, and the silence around her felt like a brief moment of peace after the chaos of the past few days. She thought about everything that had happened since the wedding. As much as she tried to convince herself that the criticisms didn't matter, they were slowly eating away at her from the inside. She felt the mounting pressure, the weight of living up to Jacob's expectations, facing society's judgment, and at the same time, holding on to her own sense of self. She knew Jacob trusted her, saw her as his equal, and that gave her strength to keep going. But deep down, she wondered if she could endure the growing tide of prejudice and challenges that seemed to come from all sides. Yet, despite her doubts, something inside Emily remained steady. She knew that with Jacob, she had found something rare. A connection that went beyond their circumstances, something that transcended time and judgment. It was this certainty that kept her grounded, even as the world around them seemed to spiral. The days that followed were a mix of highs and lows. Emily struggled to find balance between working at the cafe and building a life with Jacob. The criticisms didn't stop, but she tried to ignore them, focusing on what mattered most. Jacob, however, was facing new health complications, adding another layer of strain to their already complicated lives. It was something Jacob tried to hide from Emily as much as possible. He knew his time was running out, and the thought of leaving her alone weighed heavily on him. As their inner and external battles intensified, they both began to realize that the true test of their union was only just beginning. What lay ahead, days and months of challenges, would push the limits of their love, strength, and endurance. But through it all, one certainty remained. No matter how difficult things became, Emily and Jacob were determined to make every moment they had left together count. And in the end, that was all that really mattered. As the days passed, Jacob's health deteriorated more rapidly. The vigor he once had, the drive to maintain a semblance of normalcy, was fading quickly. Emily, who had mentally prepared herself for this inevitable truth, began to understand that their time together would be even shorter than she had imagined. Yet, she remained composed, resolved to support him in any way she could. The mansion, once a quiet sanctuary, now saw more frequent visits from doctors. Jacob, though proud, knew his strength was slipping away, but he hid the severity of his condition from everyone, even Emily. He wanted their remaining days to be about peace and connection, not about the illness that was slowly consuming him. One morning, Jacob woke in intense pain, forcing him to stay in bed longer than usual. Emily, ever by his side, sensed that today would be harder than the others. She sat beside him, holding his hand gently, as though trying to transmit strength through her touch. "You look tired," she said softly, her eyes searching for a sign that would ease her worries. Jacob smiled faintly, his eyes dull with fatigue. "I think my body is finally giving me the warning I've been ignoring for too long." Emily leaned in, her heart heavy with fear and love. "You don't have to fight alone anymore, Jacob. I'm here, and I'll be with you until the end." Her words were a silent promise, one she would keep no matter how hard it got. She knew the days ahead would test both of them, and she would need to be the rock holding everything together. It was a challenge she had never anticipated, but somehow she felt ready for it. Jacob, grateful for Emily's unwavering support, carried a burden he didn't want to share. He knew the end was drawing closer, faster than expected, and the thought of leaving her behind tormented him. He had fought so hard to build something with Emily, and now, with time running out, he felt as though it hadn't been enough. That afternoon, while Jacob rested, Emily took a walk through the mansion's garden. The fresh breeze and the soft rustle of the leaves calmed her spirit, but her mind remained troubled. Doubt, fear, and the pain of losing Jacob gnawed at her, emotions she tried to hide, but that only grew stronger each day. Meanwhile, Jacob, who had asked to be left alone for a few minutes, sat down to write a letter. He knew he wouldn't be able to express everything he felt to Emily in person, but he needed her to understand how much her presence had transformed his final days. Even in the midst of his pain, he wanted her to know that she had been his greatest strength. When Emily returned to the house, she saw that Jacob's expression had changed. Though still frail, there was a soft glow in his eyes, as though he had come to terms with what was to come. "Emily," he began, his voice thick with emotion, "there's something I need to tell you." She moved closer, sitting beside him, her heart pounding. "What is it?" "You brought something into my life that I never found before," he said, struggling to speak the words. "I'm not just talking about love in the romantic sense, but a kind of companionship I didn't even know I needed. And for that, I want you to know, when I'm gone, everything I've built will be yours. It's not about the money or the possessions. It's about leaving something for someone who made every one of my final days worthwhile." Tears welled in Emily's eyes, but she tried to hold them back. She knew this moment was coming, but hearing Jacob speak of a future without him was unbearable. "Jacob," she said softly, her voice breaking, "you don't have to talk about this now. We still have time." He shook his head, offering her a soft smile. "Maybe we do, maybe we don't. But it's important that you know you changed my life in a way I could never repay." Jacob handed her the letter he had written earlier. "This is for you. When I'm gone, I want you to read it. It will say everything I couldn't express in words here." Emily held the letter carefully, feeling the weight of its meaning. She knew the moment she feared was drawing near, but she also knew that Jacob had come to terms with what was to come. In the days that followed, Jacob remained in bed, his health declining steadily. Emily stayed by his side, holding his hand, reading to him, and doing everything she could to ease his last moments. The doctor's visits grew more frequent, but Emily understood that at this stage, what Jacob needed most was not medical attention, but her presence. Then, one quiet afternoon, bathed in the soft sunlight that filled Jacob's room, he passed away. There was no pain, no prolonged suffering. He simply closed his eyes and slipped away. Emily was there, holding his hand until the very end. The silence that followed was profound and heavy. Grief washed over her, but along with it, a deep sense of peace. She knew she had done everything she could, that she had been with Jacob through it all, and that he had passed peacefully, loved and respected. Jacob's funeral was simple and intimate, just as he had requested. Only a few people attended. Emily made sure it remained a private affair, away from the prying eyes and gossip that had always surrounded their relationship. Along with her mother and a few of Jacob's closest staff, she bid him farewell in a quiet, personal manner. There was a sullen acceptance that Jacob had lived his final days the way he had wanted, honestly, and with someone who truly understood him. That night, alone in the room she had shared with Jacob, Emily opened the letter. His words, written with such care, touched her deeply. Jacob had left her more than just a material legacy, he had left an emotional one. A reminder of her strength, her resilience, and her ability to face whatever life would bring. After the funeral, the reality of Emily's new life began to take shape. As the heir to a considerable fortune, she faced responsibilities she had never imagined. The bank accounts, properties, stocks, all of it was now in her name. But Jacob's legacy wasn't just about wealth. He had entrusted her with something far more significant, the power to shape her own future. Despite the raw pain of loss, Emily knew she couldn't remain passive. The cafe, once her sanctuary, now seemed distant from her new life. Returning to work wouldn't be the same. People now knew she had inherited Jacob's fortune, and the whispers that were once discreet had become open and judgmental. So now she's rich, some would say, no longer bothering to hide it. I bet she won't need to work like the rest of us. These comments didn't surprise her anymore. Emily had steeled herself for the envy and judgment that would come. What troubled her most, though, was the sense that people thought she had somehow won something without earning it. They didn't understand the cost, the loss of Jacob, a man she admired deeply, and the emotional weight she carried every day. Determined to honor Jacob's legacy in a meaningful way, Emily resolved not to let the criticism or judgment define her. She knew she possessed power, not just financial, but the power to do something meaningful with all Jacob had left her. And above all, she knew she could use that power to help others who had faced hardship and prejudice. Without hesitation, Emily began searching for ways to use Jacob's fortune to create lasting change. She remembered how Jacob had spoken about the importance of dignity in the face of hardship, something he saw as essential to human well-being. Inspired by his vision, Emily set out to create a foundation in his name, dedicated to supporting social causes, combating prejudice, and providing opportunities for those who might otherwise never have them. The early stages of creating the foundation were challenging. Emily, who had spent most of her life far removed from the world of business, now found herself working with lawyers, accountants, and advisors who helped her understand what it meant to manage such a fortune. Yet each meeting, each decision, was filled with memories of Jacob and a determination to create something he would be proud of. Over the weeks, the Jacob Miller Foundation began to take shape. The goal was clear: to fund scholarships, support small entrepreneurs, and create programs to empower people from humble backgrounds. Emily wanted Jacob's money to create real, lasting change, something that reflected how he had transformed both his own life and hers. But as she worked on building the foundation, the pain of losing Jacob never left her. Often, in the quiet of the mansion, she would find herself sitting in the chair where Jacob had once rested, feeling his absence as though it were a physical presence. The letter he had left her remained in a special place, and although she had read it countless times before, yet each time the words carried the same weight. In moments of longing, Emily would often revisit Jacob's letter, finding solace in his carefully chosen words. *U showed me the true meaning of partnership. It's not about how much time we have, but what we do with that time. Life is short, but you gave me something eternal, the certainty that by your side, I found peace. *. Those words stayed with her, guiding her through every decision and step she took in the work they had begun together. Emily understood that what they had built was far more than wealth. It was a legacy, one that would outlast them both. As the months passed, the foundation began to gain momentum, and the impact of their efforts rippled across the country in ways Emily hadn't imagined. People from all walks of life benefited from the programs Jacob had dreamed of. His vision for a more equitable, dignified world was taking shape, and though he was no longer physically with her, Emily felt his influence in every accomplishment. But despite the foundation's success, Emily knew there was still something she hadn't fully dealt with: grief. She had poured herself into the work, using it as a distraction from the loss, but deep down, she knew the time would come when she would have to face the pain. And then, one evening, months after Jacob's death, the weight of it hit her. Sitting alone in the mansion's garden beneath the same star-filled sky that had witnessed so many conversations with Jacob, Emily finally allowed herself to cry. The sorrow she had been holding back for so long came rushing forth. She let herself feel the full emptiness of his absence, the ache that had never truly gone away. But even in the midst of the tears, there was gratitude. She knew their time together had been short, but their love had transformed her life. Jacob had given her more than wealth. He had given her purpose. And with that, Emily knew that no matter how difficult it was to move forward, she would honor his memory in everything she did. That night, as the stars glittered above and a gentle breeze stirred the air, Emily made a quiet promise to herself. She would continue living, continue fighting, and make every moment count, because that was what Jacob would have wanted. Still, despite her commitment to the foundation, Emily felt something was missing. She needed to find a way to live for herself, not just for Jacob's legacy. But before she could move forward, she knew she had to confront her grief head-on. One evening, as she sifted through some of Jacob's old belongings, Emily found an old key tucked inside an envelope. His name was written on the paper with a short, simple note. For when you're really intrigued, Emily stared at the key, feeling as if it held a deeper meaning, though she couldn't quite grasp it. The next day, after meeting with Jacob's lawyer, Emily discovered that the key opened a hidden property, a small country house Jacob had kept secret, never even mentioning it to her. The discovery shocked her in ways she hadn't anticipated. Why had Jacob kept this from her? What was the purpose of the house? The mystery consumed her, and she knew she wouldn't find peace until she had the answers. Determined, Emily set out for the property. It was located in a remote area, nestled among tall trees, with a river flowing quietly nearby. When she arrived, she was taken aback by the beauty of the place. The house was modest, but held a peaceful, inviting charm. It was the kind of place Jacob would have cherished, far from the noise and demands of the city. As Emily stepped inside, a rush of emotions overwhelmed her, memories of Jacob, of their time together, and of everything they had shared. The house seemed to hold pieces of him, and Emily knew she had just uncovered a part of his life she had never known. The walls, adorned with old photos, revealed a side of Jacob she had never known. In them, he appeared younger, carefree, unburdened by the weight of responsibilities. Some of the photos showed a smiling Jacob with friends Emily had never heard of, and in that moment she realized there was so much more to his life than she had ever imagined. Then, on one of the shelves, something caught her eye, a letter addressed to her. Her hands trembled as she opened the envelope. Jacob's words, though straightforward, were charged with emotion. Emily, if you're reading this, it means I'm already gone. There are so many things I wish I had said, but never found the courage to while I was alive. This house is my final gift to you. It is here that I found the peace I had been searching for all my life. I didn't want to involve you in it before because I knew you needed to find your own path, but now this house is yours. It's a place for you to breathe, to remember that life goes on, even after loss. Here, I want you to know, it's okay to move forward. It's okay to live fully without carrying the guilt of my absence. Asterisk. Tears began to fall. Emily read the letter over and over, each word sinking deeper into her heart. Jacob had known she would need time to heal, and somehow he had anticipated this place would be where she could begin to do so. The small country house, tucked away from the world, was more than just a retreat. It was a sanctuary for her to reconnect with herself. In the days that followed, Emily returned to the house repeatedly. Sitting by the river, she felt something she hadn't in months: peace. Each visit seemed to wash away a little more of the pain, as if Jacob was still there, in spirit, helping her take steps toward healing. The foundation continued to grow, but now, Emily was determined to expand its impact in a more personal way. Inspired by the healing she was beginning to experience, she created a special retreat program for young people dealing with grief and emotional struggles. She knew better than anyone how difficult it was to navigate the pain of loss, and she wanted to offer others the same opportunity for healing that she was starting to find. During a charity event for the foundation, Emily introduced the new program and was approached by Sarah, one of the first beneficiaries. Sarah, her voice thick with emotion, shared her story. I lost my parents 2 years ago, and I didn't know how to deal with the pain. I was lost without direction until I found the retreat you created. Those days were transformative for me. I felt a peace I hadn't known since they passed. Thank you, Emily. What you're doing is saving lives. Asterisk. Sarah's words struck Emily deeply. Jacob's legacy wasn't just hers. It had reached out and touched other lives in ways she never could have imagined. The foundation wasn't merely a tribute to him. It was a means of continuing to impact the world, helping those who needed it most. Even with the foundation's success and growth, Emily understood that her true happiness lay in finding a balance between the past and the future. Selling Jacob's mansion was an agonizing but necessary step. Letting go of the grand property felt like she was finally allowing herself to move forward. With the proceeds from the sale, Emily expanded the foundation's reach, creating support centers for underserved communities and offering resources to those facing struggles similar to the ones she and Jacob had endured. Each new project reignited her sense of purpose. However, it was the country house that became her true home. It wasn't a mansion, but to Emily, it was where she truly found herself. She had overcome the doubts, the judgments, and the grief. And while Jacob remained a presence in her memory, Emily knew he had prepared her for something greater, to live fully without regrets, knowing that she had fulfilled the purpose they had built together. One afternoon, as she sat on the porch watching the sunset, Emily smiled softly to herself. A sense of lightness filled her heart, something she hadn't felt in a long time. The gentle breeze seemed to carry with it the quiet assurance that Jacob, in some way, was still with her, watching over everything she had accomplished. And so, as the shadows of night began to fall, Emily realized that her new chapter was just beginning. She had so much more to live for, and Jacob had been only the beginning of a much larger journey. Asterisk, what do you think? Did Emily make the right choice by marrying Jacob? Share your thoughts in the comments. We'd love to hear from you. Your participation is really important to us. Don't forget to subscribe to the channel for more stories like this one. Thank you for watching.